Adrian, you will notice that his accent is not American like mine, as he told me recently that he's born in Romania, but you lived in Silicon Valley for how many years?
I lived in Silicon Valley for close to 20 years now, since 1994.
Right.
With the exception of 1 year, I lived in Japan, here in Tokyo, in 93 and 94. In fact, my son is born here, so this is a very, very exciting moment for me. First time here in 20 years, actually.
Okay. And is your son with you?
Unfortunately, he's not.
Okay. Then I guess you're sending back photos.
I am, especially the Halloween photos from yesterday night. I didn't let Japanese celebrate Halloween so incredibly. It's quite amazing.
Enthusiastically, right?
That's right.
How many companies did you have time to start and sell in your 20 years?
I started only 2, and I was part of the management team of 2 other successful companies.
Great. Well, tell us about Mirantis then, your latest venture.
Thank you very much, Lee. All right, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Ericsson, for having me here as a guest speaker. What I'd like to speak about is not only technology, or not primarily technology, but something that I believe is much more important to humanity, which is how we create things together, how do we move humanity forward together, and technology is just one very, very important aspect of that. I believe what's happening in the world today is an incredible infrastructure revolution. And when this revolution is done, it will feel to us like the difference between air travel and ship travel, steamship travel 200 years ago. I believe we are going to have 1,000 times improvement in the power of compute and networks all over the world in 10 years from now, and I believe I'll show you why. And I believe that there is a completely different way, the way engineers and the world go about creating this incredible disruption, this incredible innovation that's happening. And then finally, I want to close with one example, which is what we do at Mirantis, but we are not the only ones. Many other friends and colleagues in the same industry do it, which is OpenStack, a very, very particular part of infrastructure, which we call something like Google in a box. But let me start with why do I believe that there needs to be a massive revolution in infrastructure technology. I think there are 3 fundamental drivers. The first driver is the explosion of new devices connected to the internet. In 10 years from now, we will have anywhere between 50 and 100 billion smart devices connected in real time to the internet producing data. And that's a staggering amount of devices. In addition to that, as all of us have seen, the way we interact with these devices has dramatically changed over time. The world is moving to a much more natural way of interacting with devices. Natural language processing, high definition interaction, complete immersion in reality. And that requires enormous processing power and a lot more data than we've ever had in the past. So I want to give you 2 examples what it actually means. You're probably all familiar with Sony PlayStation, and you're familiar with the Xbox One. So what you may not know is that although the Xbox One is dramatically more powerful than the previous generation, it also, at the time it was launched with 300,000 servers in the backend in a Microsoft cloud to support the Xbox One. That's the type of computing power that you need to support these modern new devices for entertainment, for example. Another example that I want to give you for what this means is Siri, something that many of you might be familiar with. So as Apple introduced Siri, at the same time they invested nothing less than $1 billion to build a new cloud data center to power all the cloud services, and especially the natural language processing to underpin Siri. So with the emergence of all these smart devices constantly connected to the internet, we also need the processing power behind it to support it. And we need it exponentially faster than it is today. Now, in addition to this infrastructure evolution, what is happening is a completely new way of creating innovation. The traditional way, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or maybe 50 years ago, creating innovation was people got together in companies and they built teams, they built technology, they had proprietary IP and they sold it. There is an alternative to that. And the alternative is open source. And today, I believe it's the most powerful way to create innovation at the infrastructure layer. And there are some very unique social differences why open source is extremely powerful versus closed source innovation. And I want to share with you my perspective of why those differences of how open source works and creates innovation is very, very different. The first thing about open source that's different compared to traditional vendors is it starts with the user. It's very often user-driven. Very often, an open source piece of software is created by users. And there are lots and lots of examples for that. If you're looking at Hadoop, it was created by companies like Google and Yahoo who needed to create it to support the gigantic infrastructure. If you're looking at Cassandra, it was created by Facebook. So the user is very, very heavily involved from the very beginning in creating the new technology. Moreover, throughout the innovation cycle, the user remains extremely powerful in steering the direction of the new technology. And that's very different about open source. The other thing that's different about open source is that it is completely open. So anyone, literally anyone on the planet can join an open source project and can contribute a new idea. The idea might be code, the idea might be a design or an architecture component. Anybody can do it, and that's also very powerful. The next difference is also very transformational, and that's the way open source projects are actually organized. The traditional industrial way of producing software is the industrial hierarchy model in various shapes and forms. Open source works much more like nature. Open source is actually nothing more than a collection of social networks where people are bound together and work together of their own free will with no really strong center of power or authority. It's a very, very different way of people working together to get things done. And then finally, there is another huge power behind open source, which is the idea of complete transparency and meritocracy. Anyone can see at any one given time what anybody else contributes and what you do. And that creates transparency. That also creates meritocracy, and it drives an enormously powerful competitive force. Very, very different way from the way people are traditionally organized in industrial structures. All of this leads to two very powerful phenomena. One of it is very fast adoption, with the users being involved from the very beginning. The adoption happens naturally. Open source is also very often free, so it's very easy to access. And the other very, very powerful element for open source is the way it actually connects with the rest of the environment. I want to give you a few examples, technical examples that you probably all know and that have changed the world. One is the emergence of open source operating systems, Linux, which today is the most powerful foundation for running cloud data centers around the world. Entirely an open source movement. The other one is Java. Object-oriented language did not exist before, and a very, very large part of the enterprise world uses Java today to create new software. And then finally, another very powerful example is what's happening today in the disruption of big data, where you have Hadoop emerging as a dominant player, the default choice for massive processing of data in the enterprise, as well as in new companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google, and the like. Moreover, open source, because it is extremely cost effective and it is on a very fast pace of innovation, and it allows an enormous degree of flexibility and customization, has given birth to some incredible new business models that would not be possible without open source. And some examples is the colleague who will speak after me, Facebook, is built very largely on open source technology. Another example is Google, that's largely built infrastructure on open source technology. Twitter and Amazon, huge powerhouses, are built on open source technology. And that's extremely important because if these folks had to buy the software commercially, they wouldn't have the innovation curve and they wouldn't have the cost structure to be able to operate their gigantic infrastructures. Finally, I want to close with one very specific example of open source that is about Mirantis and what we do, and that's OpenStack. OpenStack is like Google in a box. It gives you a cloud infrastructure that you can deploy in a box so that any company in the world can take advantage of the economies of scale and innovation curve that Google has. It is also one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing infrastructure open source movement in history. And let me give you some examples. Next week there is the OpenStack Summit in Hong Kong. It happens twice a year. This time we'll have 5,000 people there. 2 years ago there were 500 people. And 3 years ago nobody heard about OpenStack. And today, you have companies that are investing in OpenStack that are among the largest, most successful players in the world. You have people like Ericsson who are investing in OpenStack and are committed to OpenStack as a core part of their future network infrastructure. You have PayPal, you have eBay, you have Apple, you have Nokia, you have Siemens. You have all the major technology players, small and large, in the world, either investing in pilots for OpenStack or some companies that are more advanced, PayPal, completely committing to OpenStack. And again, 3 years ago, this technology did not exist. And it was in fact started by 2 users. It was not started by HP, by Rackspace, or by HP, by Red Hat, or traditional vendors. It was started by NASA for their own use case because they wanted to build their own cloud. They could not use Amazon to protect the data. It was started by Rackspace. So from 3 years to massive adoption all over the industry. That's amazing. And that's very much about the power of the open source model. Now, what does Google in a box mean? What are the benefits to companies? The first benefit is that it is insanely scalable and cost efficient. You can grow to a huge number of servers, and extremely cost efficient servers and software and storage. The next element that's different and very valuable is that in the case of OpenStack, or cloud technology, the application software controls the computers directly. So you can have an app that runs on an iPhone automatically request another 10,000 backend servers instantaneously using one of these future extremely low latency networks where you will have wearables in your ear not very far from now that will send a command onto the data center. You will get the 10,000 servers instantaneously and it will perform some very, very challenging processing act for you immediately. That's the power that OpenStack gives you. And the net result of all of these, why companies are adopting it, is because it dramatically turbocharges the productivity of software developers. And software developers, I believe, are one of the most important professions of the 21st century. because the world runs on software. So if we can make our most valuable asset, these developers, more productive, it moves the world forward. So therefore, OpenStack today is a gigantic innovation engine for the rest of the world. So I want to close with what this actually means for us, for humanity, and come back to this analogy, air travel versus travel by steamship. I believe this kind of gigantic platforms, this infrastructure that will be 1,000 times more powerful than it is today, will fundamentally transform humanity. And it will make the biggest impact, maybe not in technology, but in social areas, which are most important to us. It will make the biggest impact in education, where by using modern technology, we will be able to deliver to some kid in Africa with a smartphone an incredible education experience that he would never have access to and otherwise. And it will be free. It will deliver telemedicine to people around the world instantaneously where it's needed. It will create more breakthroughs in science because people will be able to better collaborate and process data on a gigantic scale never possible before. And then finally, there is another incredibly important aspect to this. I think it will create a more peaceful world. Because open source, by definition, is globally connected. We work with people at Mirantis from all over the world all the time. Whether they are in China, they are in Brazil, they are in Poland, they are in Southern California. We're all connected towards one shared goal, and we're doing it in a voluntary fashion. There is nobody there telling us to do it. And when people around the world pursue a common goal together and learn to create something meaningful together rather than destruction, you can have an incredibly powerful effect in creating a more peaceful world. So that's one of the reasons why I am excited to be at Mirantis. And I want to thank again Ericsson for inviting me to speak with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lots of nice stuff to pick up on later.